For my anniversary, my family took me to a cheap diner and gave me a card that said, "Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating." They all laughed, even my mom. I just smiled, took a photo, and left without a word. 5 days later, they were panicking in the group chat. I, 32M, never thought my 10th wedding anniversary would be the day I'd finally see my family for who they really were. But sometimes the universe has a funny way of opening your eyes when you least expect it. My wife had been planning something special for weeks. At least, that's what I thought when she kept whispering with my sister and mom during family dinners. I figured they were coordinating some surprise celebration. After 10 years of marriage and building a successful consulting business from scratch, I felt like we had something worth celebrating. The morning of our anniversary, my wife told me to dress casually because we were meeting the family for a special lunch. I put on my favorite button-down and khakis, grabbed the small gift I'd prepared for her, and followed her to the car with genuine excitement. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the parking lot of Danny's Diner. Not the upscale restaurant downtown where we'd had our rehearsal dinner. Not even the mid-range chain where we usually took the kids for birthdays. Danny's Diner, the place with cracked vinyl booths, sticky floors, and a menu that hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. I stared at the faded neon sign and felt my stomach drop. My wife was already out of the car, walking toward the entrance like this was completely normal. I followed her inside, telling myself there had to be some mistake. The entire family was already there, crammed into a corner booth that could barely fit 6 people. My parents, my sister, and her husband, my brother, all of them looking like they were trying not to laugh about some private joke. They waved us over with forced enthusiasm. My mother slid over to make room, and I squeezed in next to her. The vinyl was torn and had been patched with duct tape that stuck to my pants. My brother immediately launched into a story about his latest promotion at the marketing firm, while my sister chimed in about her daughter's acceptance into a prestigious preschool. I sat there listening to them talk about their achievements, waiting for someone to acknowledge why we were all there. The waitress came by, a teenager with purple hair who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, and took our orders. I asked for the club sandwich, trying to make the best of whatever this was supposed to be. That's when my sister reached into her purse and pulled out a card. It was one of those generic anniversary cards you grab at the gas station, with faded roses on the front and gold lettering that had probably been trendy in 1995. She handed it across the table with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. My wife was smiling too, that tight smile she got when she was trying to hide something. I opened the card, expecting the usual generic message about love and commitment. Instead, someone had crossed out the printed text and written in blue ballpoint pen, "Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating." I stared at those words for a long moment, reading them twice to make sure I understood correctly. Then I looked up at the faces around the table. My brother was covering his mouth, trying not to laugh. My sister was biting her lip, her eyes dancing with amusement. My father was studying his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. And my mother, my own mother, let out a small giggle that she tried to cover with a cough. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some elaborate setup for a real celebration. This wasn't a joke that would lead to something better. This was it. This was their idea of how to acknowledge 10 years of my marriage. My wife leaned over and whispered that she thought it was funny, that everyone had contributed ideas for the message. She said it lightheartedly, like we were all in on some hilarious prank that I just didn't get yet. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. I even managed to smile as I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the card, making sure to get the message clearly in frame. Everyone assumed I was documenting the moment because I found it amusing too. My brother made some comment about how I should frame it and put it on my desk at work. My sister added that maybe it would motivate me to actually do something noteworthy this year. Even my father, who usually stayed out of family drama, nodded along like this was all perfectly reasonable. I finished my sandwich in silence while they continued their conversation about their own accomplishments. My wife talked about the pottery class she'd started, my mother discussed her book club, my sister went on about her volunteer work. None of them asked about my business, which had just landed its biggest client 3 months ago. None of them mentioned the pro bono work I'd been doing for local nonprofits. After about an hour of this, I stood up and announced that I needed to head home to take care of some things. I thanked everyone for the lovely lunch, wished my wife and myself a happy anniversary, and walked out of that diner with the same smile I'd been wearing since I opened the card. The drive home was quiet. My wife seemed satisfied with how the afternoon had gone, chatting about how nice it was to get the family together. I made appropriate responses while my mind raced through every family gathering over the past few years, seeing them all in a new light. That evening, my wife went to her sister's house for what she called a girls' night. I sat in my home office, staring at that photo of the card on my phone. 10 years of marriage. 15 years of building relationships with these people. And this was what they thought of me. I opened my laptop and started typing. Update 1. Over the next 4 days, I put a plan into motion that I'd never imagined I'd need. But sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and you have to decide whether you're going to keep pretending otherwise. First, I contacted my lawyer, not the family friend who'd handled simple things for us over the years, but a specialist I'd researched thoroughly. I explained the situation and asked about the cleanest way to separate my assets from my wife's, particularly the business I'd built from nothing while she pursued various hobbies and part-time jobs. Turns out that keeping detailed financial records and having her sign certain documents over the years as just paperwork had been more prescient than I'd realized. My business was entirely separate property, along with the investment accounts I'd funded solely with business profits. Next, I called my financial advisor and moved my personal investments to a different firm. I opened new accounts at a different bank. I redirected my business income to flow through new channels that my wife had no access to or knowledge of. Then I did something that felt both liberating and terrifying. I started planning my exit from this family entirely. I researched apartments in a city 2 hours away, close enough to maintain some business connections, but far enough to start completely fresh. I found a place with a short-term lease option and put down a deposit using my business account. The hardest part was going through our shared belongings and quietly removing everything that was truly mine. My books, my tools, my personal documents, a few pieces of furniture I'd bought before we got married. I moved everything to a storage unit across town, one box at a time, during the hours when my wife was at work or out with friends. By Thursday evening, I had essentially moved out of my own life without anyone noticing. Friday morning, I sat in my office and composed the most important message I'd ever written. It was for the family group chat, the one where they shared photos of their kids, planned gatherings, and generally acted like a close-knit family that I'd somehow never quite fit into. But I didn't send it yet. Instead, I spent Friday afternoon at the office of a private investigator. Not because I suspected my wife of cheating or anything dramatic like that, but because I wanted to understand exactly how long this attitude toward me had been building. I asked him to look into some things, social media posts, communications, anything that might give me a clearer picture of how my family really saw me. What he found was enlightening. Screenshots of group chats that didn't include me, where they discussed my lack of ambition and boring personality. Messages between my wife and sister about how I was holding her back and never did anything exciting. Even my mother had participated in conversations about how disappointed she was that I'd settled for such an ordinary life. The anniversary dinner wasn't a spontaneous moment of cruel humor. It was the culmination of years of discussions about my apparent worthlessness. That evening, I sat in my mostly empty house and finally typed the message I'd been crafting in my head for days. Update 2. The message I sent to the family group chat on Saturday morning was simple. Thank you all for the wonderful anniversary celebration. The card really opened my eyes. I've attached a photo of it for anyone who might have forgotten the message. I'm sure you'll all be happy to know that I've taken your advice to heart. I'm finally doing something worth celebrating. Then I added the photo of that gas station anniversary card with its cruel message, and I hit send. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. My sister was the first to respond, asking what I meant by that message. My wife called immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. My brother sent a laughing emoji followed by a question mark, like he wasn't sure if this was supposed to be funny or serious. I turned off my phone and drove to my new apartment. The place was small but clean, with large windows and hardwood floors that didn't stick to your shoes. I'd had utilities turned on under my business name, so everything was already working. I spent Saturday afternoon setting up the basics: bed, desk, coffee maker, and a few other essentials I'd bought that morning. Sunday, I turned my phone back on to find 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The family group chat was chaos. My wife was demanding to know where I was and why I wasn't answering my phone. My mother was confused, asking what was happening and why everyone seemed upset. My sister had apparently tried to downplay the anniversary card, claiming it was just a harmless joke that I'd misunderstood. But the most interesting messages came later, after they'd apparently had time to really think about what my departure might mean. My brother suddenly remembered that I'd been the one paying for our parents' anniversary dinner last month. My sister realized that I'd been covering the cost of family gatherings for years. My wife was frantically asking where I'd moved all my business equipment and why the household accounts seemed to have been closed. That's when the panic really set in. My wife showed up at my office Monday morning, but I'd already informed my business partner and our receptionist that I was working remotely for the foreseeable future. She called repeatedly throughout the day, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails about needing to talk and work things out. Tuesday, my mother called from my sister's phone, thinking I might answer if I didn't recognize the number. She left a long message about how families sometimes say things they don't mean and how important it was to stick together during difficult times. The irony wasn't lost on me. Wednesday brought a new development. My sister showed up at the storage unit where I'd been keeping my belongings. I have no idea how she found it, but the security footage showed her trying different combinations on the lock before giving up and leaving angry voicemails about how childish I was being. By Thursday, the group chat messages had shifted from confusion and annoyance to genuine panic. They'd apparently realized that I wasn't coming back from whatever this was, and the financial implications were starting to sink in. My wife sent a long text about how she'd talked to a lawyer and discovered that our assets weren't as joint as she'd assumed. My brother asked if I was really planning to abandon the family over a stupid joke. My mother wanted to know if I'd be coming to my father's birthday dinner next month, like this was all just a temporary tantrum that would blow over. Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the anniversary dinner, I sent one final message to the group chat. I spent 15 years trying to be part of this family, and 10 years building a life with someone who apparently saw me as ordinary and boring. Last week, you all made it clear how little you think of me and my accomplishments. I heard you loud and clear. I'm finally doing something you might consider worth celebrating. I'm starting over, somewhere I'm actually valued. Don't contact me again. Then I left the group chat and blocked all their numbers. Update 3. 3 weeks later, I was settling into a routine I hadn't experienced since college. Complete autonomy over my own life. My new city was smaller than where I'd lived before, but it had a vibrant downtown area and several companies that could use my consulting services. I'd already had coffee meetings with 3 potential clients, and one had asked me to submit a formal proposal for a 6-month project that would pay more than I'd made in the previous year. The private investigator I'd hired delivered his final report, and it was worse than I'd expected. The communications he'd uncovered showed that my wife had been complaining about me to her family and friends for at least 3 years. She'd apparently been building a case for why our marriage was holding her back and why she deserved better. My own family's messages were just as revealing. My sister had been telling people for months that I was going through a midlife crisis and refusing to take risks. This about a man who'd left a corporate job to start his own business. My brother had been describing me as the boring, responsible one who never did anything interesting. Even my parents had participated in conversations about my wasted potential and lack of ambition. The most painful discovery was a group chat between my wife, sister, and mother from 2 months before the anniversary. They'd been planning the joke for weeks, discussing different ways to give him a wake-up call about his mediocre life. The anniversary dinner wasn't a spontaneous moment of cruelty. It was a calculated attempt to humiliate me into changing in whatever way they thought I should change. Reading those messages felt like discovering that people I'd loved and trusted had been lying to my face for years. But it also felt like validation. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being too sensitive. They really had been treating me like I was less than worthy of basic respect. A month after I'd left, my wife filed for divorce. Her lawyer contacted my lawyer with demands that were so unrealistic they bordered on delusional. She wanted half of my business, despite having no involvement in its creation or operation. She wanted spousal support based on projections of future income she had no claim to. She wanted me to continue paying for things like her car, her gym membership, and her pottery classes. My lawyer's response was swift and thorough. He provided documentation showing that my business was separate property, that my wife had shown no interest in contributing to our household income during our marriage, and that she had actually been planning to leave me for months before I left her. The private investigator's findings became particularly useful when her lawyer tried to claim that I'd abandoned the marriage without cause. 2 months after leaving, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father calling from a friend's phone. He sounded older than I remembered and tired. He explained that my mother had been asking him to reach out, that the family was falling apart without me. Apparently, family gatherings had become tense affairs where everyone seemed uncomfortable and on edge. He also mentioned that they'd realized how much I'd been contributing to family expenses over the years. Without my quiet financial support, several planned events had been canceled or significantly scaled back. But what struck me most was when he said that my mother kept asking what they'd done wrong, like my leaving was some inexplicable tragedy rather than a predictable response to years of disrespect. I told him that I hoped he was doing well, that I wished him happiness, but that I had no intention of returning to relationships built on the assumption that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect they felt like offering. He was quiet for a long moment before saying he understood, and that he was proud of me for building something good for myself. It was possibly the most genuine conversation we'd ever had. Final update. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new home, not the temporary apartment, but a house I bought in my new city. It's small, but it's mine, with a home office where I run my consulting business and a garden where I'm learning to grow vegetables. My divorce was finalized last month. My ex-wife got exactly what she'd contributed to our marriage, nothing. The prenup we'd signed, which she'd insisted on because she wanted to protect her independence, turned out to protect mine instead. My business has grown beyond anything I'd imagined while I was trying to balance family obligations with professional development. Turns out that when you're not constantly managing other people's opinions of your choices, you have a lot more energy to invest in actual success. I've made friends here who value things like reliability, kindness, and competence, qualities my family apparently saw as boring and ordinary. I've started dating someone who thinks my stability and ambition are attractive rather than settling for mediocrity. Last week, I got a message from my sister on LinkedIn. Apparently she'd forgotten that I'd blocked her everywhere else. She said the family missed me and wondered if we could put this whole thing behind us for the sake of family unity. I didn't respond, but I did take a screenshot, because sometimes you need reminders of why you made the right choice. The anniversary card is still in my phone's photo album, right next to pictures of my new house, my thriving business, and the life I've built since I finally did something worth celebrating. I left people who didn't value me and found people who do. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at people who hurt you. Sometimes it's just living well without them and letting them figure out too late what they lost. My next anniversary will be the first one of my new life. I'm planning to celebrate it properly this time.